We're joined by Ibrahim Suffian, who's director of the Merdeka Center for Research in Kuala Lumpur. Good to have you back on the programme with us. Now, we've seen nearly $20 billion committed across just 3 nations. How sustainable are these subsidies if the Strait of Hormuz remains disrupted beyond the summer months?
I think, to put it very simply, these measures are not very sustainable in the long run. I think most of the governments can probably sustain these subsidies and support in between a few weeks to a few months. But, this cannot go on indefinitely without actually narrowing the eligibility of the segments of the population that can be supported by such subsidies. I think if you look at the specific figures, Japan alone is spending about $5 billion in order to support gasoline prices. Indonesia has budgeted about $22 billion for energy subsidies. And so we have large numbers of public funds being allocated to support subsidies. But I think there is a deeper problem beyond just the market prices, the crude oil prices. But there is I think going to be a crunch involving refined products and logistics, that even with the subsidy support and the current ceasefire that is technically in place, the bills can continue to keep rising. And some analysts are saying that even with these things already in place, but given the damages that's already been sustained in the oil facilities, production facilities in the Middle East, there could potentially be a 3 to 5 million barrels per day shortfall as it affects Asia into the coming years.
And will work-from-home mandates be enough to stabilise these prices, or could we be looking at mandatory industrial power cuts across the region?
I think the work-from-home mandates will support the things at the margin for the short term. But I think it will not be enough on its own. Governments like Malaysia has already asked its public sector employees to start working from home starting next week. In Vietnam, it's also extended to encourage people in the private sector to do that. But the reason is work from home mandates alone is not enough to stabilize the fuel stocks that many of these countries are likely going to see shortages. So it's not enough. And I think what we probably will see coming up soon will be fuel rationing, stock releases, and demand management. So I think at some point we're going to see curbs in terms of energy supply in these countries, and that definitely will have an impact on the industrial sector in the form of either stoppages or curbs in terms of operating hours, particularly those in the energy-intensive sectors.
And with the region now looking at alternative sources from Russia and Oman, do you see this as a temporary band-aid fixture or a permanent realignment of Asia's energy trade routes?
I think for the short term, it is temporary, but there is a high likelihood that it will continue into the future. As I've mentioned before, the damages that's been sustained in many of the oil production facilities means that it will take a long time before those facilities come back on stream. And therefore, supplies from countries like Russia and Oman are likely going to be able to support a little bit of the demands coming from Asia. And this likely will translate into, I think, a permanent feature in terms of their supply matrix. But I think longer term, there will still be shortages that they have to contend with.
Ibrahim Suffian, Director of the Merdeka Center for Research, thank you very much for speaking to us.